Come June, a certain anticipation grows within the spirit of the Victorian Riflemen of Western North America. For near the beginning of summer break, our annual rendezvous in the pleasant fields of Alberta takes place, amongst friends, old and new. First held in 2005, it marks an important part of the shooting year for those who attend. They come from all over, Canada, the US, and have come from as far away as New Zealand, the UK, and Europe. The Alberta shoot remains open to invited members of the forum only. It was touch and go as to whether the shoot would take place at all due to the friction created by a certain global unpleasantness. But in the end, it all worked out.
Ready!
As with previous years, thanks must go to Richard, Linda, and family for their kind hospitality and the use of their farm for our annual weekend of Victorian musketry. Every year is like a homecoming, and for those lucky enough to attend, the memories last forever. There was an added quality to this year's shoot, and I thought that this verse from Kipling resonated well, if a bit tongue-in-cheek. This year was uncommonly hot, with record temperatures across Western Canada. And while no one succumbed to blindness caused by 37 seconds of bareheaded exposure, it did have a somewhat calming effect on things, as the pace of activities diminished to a degree, as succor from the heat was sought in the 40-plus degree temperatures. Our targets were a mix of old and new, and will generally be familiar to those who have watched the videos from previous years. There were the volley targets at 40 yards, a series of small targets, including some gongs for the kids, also at 40 yards, the percussion smoothbore targets at 50 meters, a disappearing target frame and a steel figure 3 at 55 yards, the horde and the provincial targets at 100 yards, a new target this year, the pivoting target, and a moving target placed just behind. The historically shaped Snyder challenge targets at 150 yards, and just to their left was the old red Baylor and a new Finnish Army silhouette gong at 200. For the theme shoot we had planned for Sunday, we erected a bayonet scaffold and a series of dummies, sandbags stuffed with grass. Forum member Bill was unable to attend this year, but as it was his idea, we decided to mark the occasion. Also for the theme shoot, we erected our very own Heights of Dargai, accompanied by a series of gongs placed at 200 yards in the woodline. Consensus this year amongst those present indicated that this year's range setup was the busiest ever. Now I don't mean that in terms of numbers of activities, but it was certainly a so-called target-rich environment if there ever was one. As with every year, the foundation for most shooting lies in a series of informal matches. The Victorian Rifleman Provincial match is shot at 100 yards at a B-17 target. The International Smoothbore Percussion match is shot at 50 meters at a C-200 target, and the Snyder Challenge, which is shot at 150 yards into a historical third-class target. These simple and fun activities are shot by most, although this year there was perhaps a somewhat diminished effort, with plinking and general shooting filling more of people's time. This, of course, included the kids. The tarp fitted to the front of the range shack was a godsend this year. Previously, it's sheltered us from rain and hail. This time, it was very much appreciated for the shade it brought.
Efficient, shall we say? So there we are. That was the first military issue bolt action magazine. That was from 1872.
What was it? Carry the two.
Yeah, I pick all those out.
Huh?
I pick all those out.
Oh, I love those.
Just don't mind them. I pick them out.
Same with the little white.
If I can be somewhat mercenary, I was able to bring a good number of rifles and muskets that I hadn't had the opportunity to shoot to date. The first of which was the Mark III Snyder cavalry carbine.
Look at this little backside, eh? Look how tiny it is. So this is the 62.5. This is the normal.
Oh, your sweet
So
spot
it's going to
load.
be.
Did they go out drinking last night?
Well, we went for supper and then we went back to
Are at 5 o'clock in the.
Can I go in the back seat?
9 o'clock,
She's like,
2 rings.
That's exactly where I was aiming.
There you go.
You're shooting right on a little bit left.
This was James' first shoot, and he put his F-pattern EIC musket to good use.
It's pretty well exactly the same size. In fact, let me measure it with the calipers.
One of the most interesting parts of the shoot are all the different arms that arrive with their owners to be shot. There is always a unique selection of one-offs, obscure patterns, or rescued examples, along with some period foreign arms for interest's sake. Despite the presence of the odd 20th century rifle or a South Asian matchlock, the shoot is very much focused on the 19th century. The usual examples of Enfield, Snyder, Martini, and Metford round out the arsenal at any typical Victorian rifleman gathering. Oh, and Barbies too.
no.
So you'll have to explain this, please. This is the primitive weapons section, eh?
Well, I don't even really know where to start with it. Came up, probably started. The beginning of the story is in Cheltenham, where there was a Militaria shop, and they were selling to Cheltenham in England, and they were selling a couple of bronze cast barrels, probably for model cannons or something. One of them had trunnions on them, and I inspected it, and it looked like it didn't have any horrible cavities or whatnot, and the barrel does go all the way down to the bottom. And I thought, well, I could mount this one on a stick and turn it into something sort of vaguely medieval, and that was sort of the beginning of it. And it stayed in the wardrobe for a few years and hadn't shot it, and it's the first time I've actually taken it out to see if it actually throws a bit of lead down range.
Sure.
And Well, it does, just don't know where.
What caliber is it?
It's probably about 36, maybe
Okay.
35. That shoots about a 34 caliber round ball.
Right.
And because I don't want to really test my luck with the quality of the barrel, I'm just putting 30 grains of powder in it.
Sure.
But it's plenty.
And then there's no obviously any like a serpentine or anything like that. So
No,
you're
it's just
hand-holding
it's
the
just
ignition source?
hand touching it. Now, I think I'd be much better off with the medieval method, which would be to put serpentine powder straight into the pan.
Right.
You squish that with your thumb,
Okay.
and then once you put the match to it, it burns like a fuse for 1 or 2 seconds,
Oh.
maybe 3.
Yeah.
And with that delay, it means you can then light the match, aim, and then before it goes off. And that's especially important for medieval guns which didn't have a pan cover and were just a tube with a hole on and maybe a bit of a dish for a pan,
Right. Okay.
because then you can load it like that
Sure.
and then fire.
Wow. And the purpose of having the rammer in the hole in the butt vertical, is that just to
Well-
help steady?
Well, I mean, that seems kind of
Yeah.
awkward, and it did occur to me a few days ago, and I thought, well, how can I make that better? Well, I've got this rammer, and it seems to be the same hole as that.
Yeah.
So stick it in there. Seems to be a good, well, and
Okay, just something.
it's something that a brace that
Yeah.
works somewhat in
Sure.
in
Okay.
acting as a shoulder stock.
Because medieval guns like that, they would have been under the arm.
Well, there is depictions of them firing them from such positions.
Okay.
And I think some people can get respectable accuracy with holding them from the hip,
Right.
but it is instinctive
Yeah.
and it's not ideal.
Sure.
And I think, as long as guns have existed, people have been trying to, aim down that barrel and get some degree of accuracy from them. And I think that's where the serpentine powder comes into play.
Right. Sure.
Like the fact you can get that fuse that sticks to it. You can turn it upside down.
Oh,
you can
great.
run up to a castle wall, put your match to it, aim at the battlements, and blast away.
That's
Full
interesting.
all convenience. It burns very well.
Cut bits of horseshoe fungus.
Yeah. Once it dries, I think because of its porous nature,
Yeah.
it just allows the ember to. It's a supply of oxygen that
Right.
you can't snuff it out really.
Huh.
Especially once it's charred. I mean, I've charred this. Yeah.
Not anywhere in the woods.
It's not like the stuff grows on trees.
Watch your fingers though.
See if I can hit. No idea.
This year's Snyder Challenge was shot in a somewhat abbreviated form. Only 4 of us shot it, and it was agreed that the trophy given to the winner would not be awarded until our American brethren rejoined us.
How long have you been doing this, Tito? 3 months?
That one was a good one as well. It was just. This is a black thing. It's just there, sort of thing. You've got one there and one there.
I only have 1 left.
They're sort of forming a group.
Finally.
We did good.
Perfect height. So you're halfway between the circle and the bull. Like, yeah, same spot again. Just there.
Right hand side.
Yeah, which is lower than the last one.
I took this opportunity to use the Snyder carbine for the shoot.
Just outside the square bull, 5 o'clock, Rob. That is 10 o'clock, probably just cutting the black or very close to cutting the black. lost that one in the smoke.
No, I was shooting one of the 200 gongs.
Oh, okay.
You hit it. I heard it.
Did it?
I heard it.
Oh, I didn't hear it. Yeah.
Oh no, I heard it ring. Yeah, that hit you. Both of those did.
As it was, the scores across the board, based on a best 5 of 8 rounds, with the highest possible score of 15, were somewhat lackluster. Richard's single bullseye brought his score to the top. This year's International Percussion Smoothbore match also only had 4 participants.
I used to be able to see them on that go target and I can't see a thing.
And then rinse, and then just start. So the patches get all dry.
All right.
Yeah.
This match gave me the opportunity to indulge in another first for me. Finally, coming out of the wrapper, as it were, after being purchased in 2017, my F-pattern East India Company musket was put through its paces, after a few initial hiccups were overcome.
Well,
He got his tail.
That's better.
okay, let's do another one.
Fire? Yes, he got it.
Although I didn't use it for a specific match, I finally had the opportunity to fire my 1856 Enfield India Service Cavalry Carbine. This and its ordnance pattern relative must surely be the handiest of all Enfield rifles.
Maybe if I leave the patch on.
I'll go for the baler. It's the baler too. Yeah, that's
Winner, winner.
very happy.
Oh yeah.
Now just wait for the pouch from Graham, and then I'll make the belt. I've got the hook,
Okay.
so then there'll be a video for it.
Of course, what's the use of having a rifle
Over is
if you
over.
can't share it? For purposes of its first outing, I used my normal Enfield paper cartridge with 52.5 grains of 3F. Despite all the usual excitement, some people just couldn't be impressed. Next up was the firing of the Lee Metford Cavalry Carbine. Sadly, the loads I had developed for it, which, to be honest, hadn't really been developed at all, keyholed badly.
Jeez Louise.
The bore appears to be quite worn, and a solution, probably involving a larger bullet, will have to be sought. But is it ever a handy little rifle?
That would be an interesting thing to test against movement, just because it's good to stay together intact.
The last of my so-called firsts that I brought to the shoot needs specific mention, as it was due to 4 members that I was able to acquire it in the first place. A rather nice example of a 3rd pattern Brunswick rifle.
A little rough going in. I can get a bit of polishing.
As it was, the bore is somewhat pitted and will definitely require some buffing up to ensure smooth loading.
Okay.
Huzzah!
First round. Okay. Now I want to look at the patch. left.
And, of course, there were those interested to shoot it as well.
Oh, okay. It looked high from here. Oh, they're full clip for sure.
Push down.
As I mentioned before, there are some
Down on the grass.
As I mentioned before, there are some opportunities to see and even to fire some rifles here at the chute that you'd otherwise never get a chance to.
Let's see how hot these are. Front towards enemy. Not so bad. I wanted to there's like 2 pilot
Thanks to Henry,
episodes,
I was able to fire for the first time a French Berthier rifle from the Great War.
bits out. But I don't remember the whole thing. And then the second pilot,
After this, do you want to try
whatever,
the musket?
it actually
Oh,
has
yeah.
the Goldman.
Oh, yeah, I can
It
see
wasn't in the first one. The first one has Darren McGavin as the big
Well, thank you, Henry.
You're welcome.
and I don't remember him at all. Yeah, and
Another
there's
first.
other bits that you strongly
I'm
remember.
overwhelmed with the number of firsts this weekend.
His arm gets twisted. He looks like he's going
A year of firsts.
Yeah.
As mentioned, this was James' first Alberta shoot. His F-pattern musket must have shot at least 100 weight worth of round ball.
Tried to split the difference.
The vast majority of which seems to have been at a single target left over from our Horde shoot earlier in the day.
That was he hit the ground, the little roll.
Just as frustrations were building, he glanced to his left.
So unless you have a
There, John was propped up against a hay bale, taking aim at the same target, with the same F-pattern musket. With one shot, it was all over.
Oh! Now James has nothing to do.
Yeah, thanks.
Too slow, next man.
Yep.
Rob.
Yeah.
Henry had a couple of firsts as well. Here, he brought out his sergeant's fusel, dating from the Napoleonic Wars. As sergeants in that era were armed with the pike, this being a very rare item, issued to sergeants of light companies only. James brought out an example of what sealers used to use on the East Coast. And a bit of a plug for forum member Zulu Neil from the Martini Henry Society. Each year, a general theme is chosen for the shoot. This year, it was to be the Northwest Frontier. While fighting on the Afghan borders in the context of the British Empire was nearly omnipresent, we decided on a period from the late 19th century, specifically the Pathan Revolt of 1897. That year saw considerable fighting, as many tribes that rose against the British were subdued. One action in particular became famous above all others in that war: the attack on the heights of Dargai. While a detailed analysis of the battle is not the goal here, perhaps a brief explanation. Pathan tribesmen had entrenched themselves atop a high ridge, reachable only by a few select approaches. After an initially successful attack by British, Gurkha, and Indian troops, the position was thought to be unimportant to garrison. This proved to be somewhat short-sighted, and another attack had to be mounted. After initial setbacks, the 1st Gordon Highlanders were committed to the action, storming the heights and carrying the position. The action became even more famous, as Piper Finlater, injured in both feet and unable to continue up the steep slope, propped himself against a rock and continued to play the Gordons into the attack. Legend has it that the tune he had played was Cock of the North, although he seemed to remember it differently, and thought that the Hawes of Cromdale might have been it. Perhaps we'll never know, and an amusing insight into how these things become legend was explored in George MacDonald Fraser's The General Danced at Dawn, for those interested. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, Forum member Bill was unable to attend this year's shoot, but had put some thought towards involving a bayonet evolution into our theme shoot. The subsequent building of the scaffold and straw dummies was entirely his inspiration. Our attack would consist of some period musketry techniques delivered at various targets. Using independent and volley fire as ordered, we would advance towards the heights until the final rush could be made. The first stage was 3 rounds independent at the disappearing target.
At 50 yards, 3 rounds independent, 1 round per exposure. When the target appears, commence.
Volley firing would be up next.
We'll fire 3 volleys at the horde advancing to our front. Present! Fire! Ready! Present! Fire! Ready! Present! Fire! Oh! The one that got away. Advance. 1 round as the targets appear. Commence. On the height! Commence! Victorian riflemen, fix bayonets! Remember second line when we move through the first, stay behind. Victorian riflemen, advance! Charge!
that one.
Oh, and this one. Yes.
I shot one time and one at the other one. Sort of acts like a woodcutter, doesn't it?
That's 14 hits.
You got that one, didn't you?
Parted his hair.
So that's pretty good for 2 rounds apiece, right?
Yeah.
How do we do with the mover? 5, 6. That counts. That counts. Oh, this is the Raiders of the Lost Ark one, right?
Yeah.
We had to let one get away so he could tell them how formidable the English
That
are.
one there just had the wind in it. Yeah.
Sure.
Oh,
Peppered.
yeah.
And the last, what's the last?
Hoots him on my head.
Oh, just flesh
Made him
wound.
drop his rifle.
Flesh wound. Well, that's good shooting, everybody. Yeah.
The weekend proved to be very much a success. We suffered no sun blindness, nor deaths of the poor British soldier, as Kipling described. While there were a few mad dogs and indeed Englishmen out in the midday sun, everyone came away from the weekend's activities with the familiar grin on their faces. The Victorian riflemen rarely disappoint in conversation, character, and enthusiasm. Thanks to all for making such a great event, Richard and Linda and family for the hospitality, and to those who helped set up and to tear down. We all can't wait till next year. And finally, I must personally thank Richard, who, upon granting me access to his shop, the so-called inner sanctum as it were, generously assisted with advice, his considerable skills at the workbench, and parts in getting some of the arms that I had brought back to working order. The extraction and replacement of the broken side nail on the Snyder, the removal and replacement of the nipple on the Brunswick, and some reassurance on a rather corroded chamber area on the Enfield carbine. You are, sir, a true craftsman and a good friend. Thank you. For all your Snyder or Martini reloading needs, talk to Martin at X-Ring Services. If you're in need of exceptionally high quality and historic ammunition for your P53 Enfield, then stop by Brett's website, papercartridges.com. His work is of the highest quality, and his cartridges are the closest thing you'll find to an original anywhere. If you'd like to support the channel, please stop by our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. And for more information on projects and updates between videos, follow us on our Facebook page.